Khrysis and Elzhi are a duo formed of Khrysis and Elzhi. Khrysis is a hip-hop producer working with many names over the years, and Elzhi is a Detroit rapper who has put out some albums that I think are incredibly damn good. He reimagined the Illmatic album in 2011, titling it Elmatic, of course, play on words obviously, and then we have Lead Poison in 2016, which was definitely a under the radar hip hop album that I thought was brilliant, and Elzhi proved that he had such a pen game on this album. On this album, he was just spitting out so many incredibly thought-provoking lyrics, and not only that, but his song concepts were incredibly detailed and abstract as well, just so out of this world when it comes to most modern hip-hop in what I thought anyway. I mean, maybe musically it wasn't as exciting as the lyrics, but still musically it was actually pretty decent. And one thing that got people excited for this album was that Khrysis was on the production of this, which is a name that you might not be that familiar with, honestly, but the guy has worked with Talib Kweli, Rhapsody on her latest album Layla's Wisdom, and plenty of other tracks by her too, Ninth Wonder, and also a rapper called Ad2 who put out a really good album in 2015 that I am a big fan of. And so this was kind of like one of those underground rap albums that was just destined to be a really good one because of how much talent was involved just from the names, really. And yeah, this is a massive wet dream for anyone that loves underground rap over mainstream rap. You know, those people that love to champion the underground rappers and say how they're way better than the mainstream ones. I do it sometimes too, but it's one of those arguments that's just silly because you're never going to convince people that, you know, an super underground rapper is better than someone that's like sold millions, because the underground rapper isn't that accessible, but the one that has sold millions is incredibly pop friendly. And at the end of the day, that's kind of what people want. But I'm happy to announce that this album is actually very accessible. I think Elzhi on this album sounds really catchy, more melodic with his flows than he did on Lead Poison, even though Lead Poison is probably a better album. But I think like the beats really work in his favor here because there are actually some decent hooks. Elzhi sounds like, you know, he could easily pull off like a more pop sounding song, I guess, because those samples in the background, the boom back beats, do give you that sort of Joey Badass feel in some ways, in the sense that he's sort of like bouncing off the beat in a sort of like singing type way, but at the same time he's actually rapping really well. I've always thought Joey Badass does that incredibly well, and it gets overlooked for that too, and I think Elzhi in this album is doing that style as well. But those jazzy, soulful, sample heavy beats do give you that 90s nostalgia. So I can tell that a younger audience might look at this one and think, oh, this one's just for the old heads, you know, oh, it's just an old heads album, it's not pushing any boundaries. But there are some times, like in music, where you kind of just have to look at something and think, yeah, it's not pushing boundaries, but, you know, can everything push boundaries? I mean, that last Jay-Z album didn't push boundaries, but it still felt quite refreshing to hear because he was rapping some interesting things over the very good production. And if you like that No ID production from that Jay-Z album, then you're gonna like this because it's very similar in its sort of soulful way, and the boom bap beats too really give it a nice little energy across the whole thing, gives it a good flow. But for me, like, the real highlight of this album is in fact Elzhi. I mean, he just drops so many interesting lyrics across this entire album, you know, even though the beats and the instrumentals feel very familiar. I feel like if it wasn't Elzhi on this project, I probably wouldn't enjoy it that much. Overthinking is a great track, seriously, this is fucking brilliant. I mean, I love the way he's sort of like saying like, oh, I overthink, but then he goes on to sort of like explain all the things that he overthinks, and then goes on different tangents and just randomly spits out random stuff that isn't always that relevant, but then he's just like, well, maybe I'm just overthinking. Like, I like the sort of self-awareness that he brings on this track, and he's also very aware of the fact that, you know, this overthinking is an issue for him because it keeps him up at night, but at the same time, overthinking sometimes actually brings you to some very different conclusions to if you actually just brush something off. You know, sometimes you actually do have to think about things, but then he's playing it from two perspectives where it's like, it's causing me problems, but I need to do it as well. He's like in this conflict. It's a pretty cool song. Cuffing Season is quite like a relevant to today's song, where he's obviously talking about being arrested, but also like talking about how, is the arrest for a reason, or is it just for nothing? And is it just cuffing season? You know, like that sort of like period, I guess he's just made up, where it's like police are just going on any sort of trips to just take in anyone for no apparent reason, which might not necessarily be true, but I guess depending on your own experience and how many people you've known to get arrested for things that aren't really crimes, like, you would look at it that way, because I think that Elzhi has probably seen enough shit going on to the point where he can look at this and have quite a good objective opinion on it. And there's such a brilliant line here where he's like, watch out. That's if you've got your watch out at the right time in the wrong place where you do not belong. That is genius, man. Just such a play on words, like, holy shit. And by the way, that's not just like a one-off line for Elzhi. He is constantly pulling out shit like this on all of his albums. Like, he is a really good wordsmith. I do love the track Friends too. This is actually a really relatable song where he's talking about like, you know, the true friends that you've got versus the fake ones, and how you have to like spot these sort of signs and the telltale signs that you might see in the fake ones that are out to get you, and they end up being enemies, but you sort of see that you're very different to them because they're not really as good of a person as you. If you're more into like the braggadocious side of rap, then there is a track Self-Made where he's basically just, you know, providing all the answers as to how he got to where he was today, in a sense that he's now crowned himself because he's better than, you know, all the other rappers. It's a pretty standard track for hip-hop, I guess, but coming from Elzhi, I kind of just am instantly like believing it. A really clever line where he's like, some of y'all have forgotten what I'm jotting, my pen bleed while yours is blood clotting. That's pretty clever. Oh, Elzhi, what a guy. And then the closing track where he's basically just like thanking his mum and other people that like have helped him get to where he is. I really like how he's like, you know, my mum could have had an abortion, but, you know, she still pushed me through her stomach, and here I am today. It's kind of clever, you know, how like the idea that your mum could have just gotten rid of you, but like you are here, and here you are like becoming quite an influential person in a genre of music. I think that's kind of cool to look at from that perspective. And yeah, overall, I just really enjoy this. Like, this is just a hip-hop album that I can get with. Probably my favourite hip-hop album of the year so far. I'm sorry, Peggy fans and, you know, JPEG Mafia. But yeah, this one just does everything it should do for a hip-hop release. Great production, great bars, great flows, you know, a charismatic MC that is incredibly overlooked when you talk about rap music, especially from Detroit. I mean, what, Big Sean and Eminem? I don't even think they have anything close to something that's as good as what Elzhi can do, which might be a bit of a hot take. But Elzhi to me is just so much better at rapping, and his bars are just so intricate and so detailed. This guy should be bigger than he is. I hope you listen to this album. Don't dismiss it as being like an old heads rap album just because the production's a bit nostalgic. You know, it's not trap beats, it's not banging bass like fucking 6ix9ine Takeshi Castle. But it's still very clever, very wordy, and catchy as well, I would say. So yeah, do listen to this album, Jericho Jackson. B plus from me, gonna be a hip hop highlight by the end of the year. I hope you go listen to it after this review, and that is it. That is all. Hope you like this review. Subscribe to the channel for more reviews, podcasts, interviews, track reactions, album reviews, lists, everything music related, and have a good day. Have a good day.